Welcome to Australian Crime Stories. Make sure to follow on your listening platform and social media to stay up to date with the latest episodes. In April 1935, a tiger shark at Sydney's Coogee Aquarium regurgitated a human arm, setting in motion one of Australia's most bizarre crimes. The case quickly grew into a tangled investigation involving a crime underworld, a high-speed chase, and the murder of a key witness. The story often feels stranger than fiction, yet it endures as a landmark case in Sydney's history. Uncover the dark corners of this unique country with this chapter, The Shark Arm Murder. This is Australian Crime Stories. In 1935, Sydney was a growing, recovering city of about 1 million people, emerging from the Great Depression with cautious optimism. The Harbour Bridge had recently opened, while trams, ferries, and seaside culture defined daily life. The Coogee Aquarium was one of the most popular attractions, combining leisure with marine spectacle. It was an open-air complex located along the shoreline, with a network of walkways and viewing platforms overlooking seawater tanks. They showcased fish, crustaceans, and other marine life. Visitors could lean over the railings, getting closer looks. Signage around the tanks offered curious facts and warnings about the creatures inside. Bert Hobson was the owner of Coogee Aquarium and was currently facing a decline in business due to the recent demolition of the nearby Coogee Pier. Seeking to boost attendance, Bert and his son set out to catch a shark for the aquarium. At first, they hooked a smaller shark on their line. But while they were hauling it in, a 14-foot tiger shark attacked and swallowed the smaller shark whole, getting hauled in itself. It was a blessing to the father and son, who now had a show-stopping attraction. They transported it to the aquarium, where it was placed in the main tank and displayed for a fee. The shark's presence attracted significant attention, drawing large crowds eager to see the creature. Some visitors noticed that the tiger shark was behaving oddly. It moved sluggishly, often drifting without purpose, and then swam erratically, sometimes bumping against the tank walls. The shark spent long periods near the surface and occasionally made sudden thrashing movements. Most assumed this was to do with the stress of captivity. On Anzac Day, the aquarium was at its busiest. Families and children all eager to see the shark. It was this day the shark was really starting to behave oddly. The shark began to writhe, its motions sharp and unnatural. Patrons leaned closer, sensing something was about to happen. The shark convulsed, then began to retch. There was a gasp from the crowd. The shark vomited several objects into the water. Among them was something so grotesque that the crowd froze. Floating to the surface, a human arm, preserved with alarming clarity, emerged from the murky water. When police arrived at the aquarium, the scene was chaotic. Spectators were stunned, and the notion of a shark regurgitating a human arm was extraordinary. Many assumed the arm meant the shark had devoured a person, with some believing it belonged to a swimmer recently lost at sea. After all, New South Wales had already lost 3 young men to shark attacks in the past months. Police retrieved the arm and it was taken to the mortuary, where pathologists began their work. They noted that the severance was clean and precise, indicating it had been cut with a sharp blade rather than torn apart by teeth. This wasn't a shark attack. This was homicide. Someone had tried to dispose of the arm, likely throwing it away into the sea only for the shark to bring it back. The skin, muscles, and nails were remarkably intact given the time in the shark's stomach, suggesting the limb had been inside the shark for only a short period. A distinctive tattoo of 2 boxers locked in combat was on the forearm. This mark became a critical piece of forensic evidence. Detailed photographs were taken, and rubbings of the tattoo were preserved for identification purposes. Police quickly reclassified the incident as a suspected murder, led by Detective Sergeant Frank Matthews. The first step was to identify the victim. Police disseminated photographs and descriptions of the tattoo to various channels, including local media, police stations, and known associates within Sydney's criminal circles. Soon enough, a man named Edwin Smith came forward after seeing the tattoo in the press. He confirmed that the arm belonged to his brother James "Jimmy" Smith, who had been missing since April 7th. The police needed more than a tattoo to make a positive legal identification. Despite the arm's time in seawater and the shark's stomach acids, the skin on parts of the fingers and palm remained intact enough for print recovery. Investigators carefully cleaned and rehydrated the skin, then took fingerprint impressions from the preserved tissue. These prints were then compared to fingerprint records held by the police for James Smith, who was already known to them due to previous minor criminal convictions, including forgery and illegal betting. It was a match. They had their victim. Once police confirmed the arm belonged to James Smith, they immediately shifted focus to uncovering his life, associations, and possible motives for his murder. James "Jimmy" Smith was born in England in 1890. He immigrated to Australia and settled in Sydney, where he became known as a lightweight boxer for some time. After his boxing career, James worked in various capacities, including managing a billiard saloon. He was married to Gladys, and they lived in the Gladesville area of Sydney. Through police interviews with James's brother, friends, and criminal contacts, investigators learned that James had recently been working with two men in particular. In late 1934, James became associated with Reginald William Lloyd Holmes, a known criminal figure. William ran a successful family boat-building business on the harbour at Lavender Bay. On the surface, he was respectable. He had a prestigious residence, was a part of society, and carried out legitimate business. But beneath that, he was involved in a variety of illicit activities such as insurance fraud, smuggling, forging bank check schemes, and connections with criminal figures. James worked with William on several occasions, including a job where he assisted in sinking an overinsured pleasure cruiser named the Pathfinder as part of an insurance scam. He continued helping William with his illegal activities such as drug trafficking and check forgery. Police also discovered James was working with Patrick Brady, another criminal known to police. The three of them would work together. William supplied specimen signatures, Patrick would forge checks, and James would help cash them. But somewhere along the line, tensions rose. Witnesses had told police that James had been blackmailing William over a disputed business matter, which suggested a clear motive. Investigators then worked to establish a timeline for Smith's last known whereabouts. He was last seen on April 7, 1935, when he was drinking and playing cards with Patrick Brady at the Cecil Hotel in Cronulla. He had told his wife he was going fishing, but he did not return home. The real turning point came when a taxi driver stepped forward with information for police. Early in the morning, on the day after James Smith's disappearance, Patrick Brady ordered a taxi from a cottage he owned in Cronulla. Patrick instructed the driver to take him to William Holmes's house at McMahon's Point, North Sydney. An unusually long and expensive trip at the time, about 35 kilometres across the city and harbour. During the journey, the taxi driver noticed several odd details. Patrick appeared extremely nervous and dishevelled. His clothes were untidy and he seemed exhausted, as if he hadn't slept. Throughout the trip, Patrick kept his right hand in his coat pocket and refused to remove it, even to pay the fare. When they reached William's residence, the taxi driver saw Patrick go inside for a brief time before leaving abruptly. Police had their suspects, Patrick Brady and William Holmes. Detectives wasted no time placing Patrick Brady under discreet observation. Teams of plainclothes officers shadowed him through the streets of Sydney. They saw him visiting pubs but drinking little, taking short tram rides across the harbour and occasionally disposing of small bundles in rubbish bins. He appeared to be lying low but made no attempt to flee the city. The men trailing him reported that Patrick seemed to know he was being watched. He was careful, reserved, and displayed what one detective later called an almost unnerving calm. While the surveillance continued, police began searching for a possible crime scene. Rental records revealed that Patrick had recently leased a small weatherboard cottage on Toowoomba Street, Cronulla, beginning in March 1935, the same address the taxi driver picked Patrick up from. Detectives visited the area and canvassed the neighbours. The statements they gathered painted a troubling picture. Several residents remembered seeing Patrick at the house with another man around the weekend of the 7th of April. They heard loud drinking and what sounded like a quarrel that night. Early the next morning, Patrick had been seen washing clothing, scrubbing the floor and loading small parcels into a taxi. Others said they noticed a strong chemical smell, disinfectant or bleach. Detectives returned to Sydney and arranged a forensic inspection of the cottage. The search was carried out in early May and it confirmed their suspicions. Blood traces were found on the floorboards, door frame, and in a small wash basin. Sections of the timber appeared to have been scrubbed with caustic soda, suggesting an attempt to erase evidence. A knife and a small saw were recovered, both badly stained, though laboratory testing could not conclusively determine the origin of the blood. Analysts also collected bits of rope and canvas consistent with the materials used on boats, a clue that linked the scene to William, who ran a shipyard on the harbour. By mid-May, the pieces had begun to fit. Detective Matthews believed they had enough to act. Their reports were compiled and reviewed by Superintendent Crampton, who authorised an arrest for Patrick Brady on suspicion of murder. In the early morning of the 16th of May 1935, they approached Patrick at his North Sydney residence. He was taken into custody without resistance. When told he was being arrested for the murder of James Smith, Patrick simply replied,
"You'll have to prove it."
Detective Matthews led the questioning. Patrick was calm but careful. He admitted knowing James and William but denied any involvement in James's disappearance. He claimed,
"I last saw Jimmy at the Cecil Hotel. We parted company, and that was the last I knew of him."
Patrick insisted he had not been at the cottage on the night of the 7th of April, nor had he been in William's company since then. He denied that any violence had occurred. When asked about the bloodstains at Cronulla, Patrick claimed they were the result of an accident involving a cut finger while cleaning fish, a story the police found unconvincing given the scale of the stains and the strong chemical odour. Throughout questioning, Patrick avoided detailed explanations and repeatedly refused to answer certain questions, often stating,
"That's not for me to say."
Detectives pressed him on his whereabouts on the morning of the 8th of April. Patrick admitted taking a taxi but denied any visit to William's home. He could not explain why a witness had placed him in a taxi travelling to North Sydney that day. By the evening, police knew that Patrick's account was inconsistent and evasive. They placed him on remand, pending further investigation. While Patrick was in custody, detectives turned their attention to Reginald William Lloyd Holmes. They already knew William had dealings with both Patrick and James, but his exact role in the affair remained unclear. On the 18th of May 1935, William was interviewed by police. He denied any involvement in James's disappearance or death. He claimed he had no knowledge of any violent incident, insisted he had not seen James around the time of his disappearance, and denied that Patrick had confided anything to him regarding a killing. He presented himself as a man completely unconnected. On the 20th of May, things took a dramatic turn. William left his boat shed in a speedboat, racing out into the harbour. There, he took out his .32 caliber pistol and turned it on to himself. Miraculously, the bullet struck his forehead but did not penetrate, likely due to the angle and the flat trajectory. The impact rendered him unconscious and he fell into the water. But his arm had tangled in a rope, which saved him from drowning. The cold water revived him from his unconscious state and he climbed back into his speedboat. The water police had been alerted of the commotion and arrived quickly, only for William to speed away, resulting in a 4-hour high-speed boat chase. They tore out past Circular Quay, through the mid-morning ferry traffic, right down Sydney Harbour until finally he gave up just outside Sydney Heads. He was taken to hospital before being arrested, where he finally gave his account. After a failed suicide attempt and a high-speed boat chase, William was finally ready to talk. He told police that on the morning of 8th April, Patrick had arrived at his McMahon's Point home in a state of agitation. According to William, Patrick admitted to killing James during a drunken argument at the Cronulla cottage. He then dismembered his body and stowed it in a trunk that he took out into the Gunnamatta Bay and dumped in the water. William claimed that Patrick had come to his home with the severed arm and threatened him with murder if he did not receive £500 immediately. After Patrick had left his home, he travelled to the Sydney coastal suburb of Maroubra and discarded James's arm into the surf. When asked about his silence, William said he feared for his own life, a decision he now regretted. Police had their second witness against Patrick Brady. William agreed to testify in court. Police knew this would be enough to convict. The trial of Patrick Brady for the murder of James Smith was meant to be the moment of reckoning. For months, the case had gripped the city, and now the inquest into James's death had been scheduled for the 12th of June. But someone would intervene. On the morning of the inquest, William Holmes was found dead in his car. He had been shot 3 times at close range. The scene was disturbingly staged to resemble a suicide, a deliberate attempt to disguise the truth. Yet something crucial was missing. No weapon was found. Investigators quickly concluded that he had been murdered, and the reason was chillingly clear: to silence him and prevent his testimony at the inquest. William's murder became its own unsolved mystery, a shadow hanging over the courtroom. There were no witnesses or forensics to lead police. However, it's likely Patrick Brady was the man behind it. The day before William's body was discovered, he had withdrawn £500 from his account. Then in the evening, he left his home, telling his wife he had to meet someone. Could this have been the £500 Patrick Brady had demanded? Despite the shocking death of their key witness, the Crown pressed forward with their case. Over 50 witnesses were called to testify. However, without William's account, the case lacked the weight that it needed. The judge directed the jury that there was insufficient evidence to convict. The verdict was inevitable: not guilty. Patrick Brady was acquitted. He walked out of the courtroom free from the guilt of 2 murders. Only months later, Patrick would be arrested again for a forgery charge in Hobart, Tasmania. Throughout multiple retrials, he was eventually found guilty for uttering a forged document. He was sentenced to 3 years. Although Patrick Brady was never convicted, it remains highly likely that he was responsible for both murders. The lingering question is why he killed James Smith. Rumours circulated that James had been blackmailing Patrick, but no solid proof ever emerged. What did become clear after the trial, however, was that James Smith had in fact been working as a police informant, a revelation that added a new dimension to his death. James, it seemed, had been feeding police information about illegal operations on the waterfront, operations that touched both Patrick and William. It was the kind of revelation that, in Sydney's criminal world of the 1930s, could seal a man's fate. If James had informed on anyone of significance, the risk was enormous. The city's underworld during that decade was held together by fragile alliances and brutal retaliation. Betrayal was rarely forgiven, and whispers of an informant could circulate faster than proof. Perhaps the killing of James was not simply a personal dispute, but a warning, a message to others who might cooperate with the police. But another possibility soon surfaced. Among the names linked to James was Edward Eddie Wayman, a notorious safe breaker and career criminal with a reputation for ruthless efficiency. In 1932, James had tipped the police on Edward's planned robbery of the pay office at the Everleigh Workshops, a large railway maintenance facility that handled substantial cash payrolls. The police intercepted the robbery and Edwards was arrested. Suddenly, the motive for murder extended beyond Patrick. Edward would have had far more to lose and far greater reason for vengeance. Some detectives speculated that Patrick might have been acting under instruction or coercion, carrying out the killing on behalf of others higher in the criminal hierarchy. James's death, after all, bore the hallmarks of a deliberate warning. His arm had been severed cleanly, suggesting planning and precision rather than a chaotic fight. After the initial vomiting of the arm, crowds swarmed to Coogee to see the infamous shark that solved a murder. For a short time, the aquarium became a morbid attraction, but the excitement didn't last. Within a week, the tiger shark was killed and dissected by authorities searching for more body parts. None were found. The baths themselves never fully recovered from the notoriety. Public interest declined, and the facility closed permanently a few years later. Today, only remnants of its foundations remain along Coogee's shoreline, a quiet memorial to one of Sydney's strangest crimes. Ultimately, no one was ever convicted for the murder of James Smith or William Holmes. But its legacy endured. For Sydney, it became a story that blurred the line between fact and fiction. A tale of a shark, a severed arm, and a city whose underworld secrets briefly floated to the surface. Thanks for listening. Follow on your listening platform to be notified of weekly episodes.